You don't have to believe me. In fact, if I were you, I wouldn't believe me either. Because what I'm about to tell you sounds insane. I know that. I was trained to recognize disinformation, to dismantle conspiracy theories, to spot patterns of paranoia in civilians before they could spread. I spent my life operating in the shadows, following orders, eliminating threats before they could ever materialize. I thought I was serving my country. I thought I was protecting something greater than myself. But I was a fool. I was never serving my country. I was never protecting anyone but them. The ones you never see, the ones who pull the strings behind governments, behind wars, behind history itself. You think presidents and prime ministers are the ones in charge? You think elections matter? You think policies are made for the good of the people? No. You are living in a world designed for your compliance. A system so perfect in its deception that you don't even realize you're a prisoner. And I know this because I was one of the guards. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss new stories. If you enjoyed this one, leave a like, it really helps. And don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. Let's discuss. I didn't realize it when I was alive. I was too busy following orders, doing my job, convincing myself that what I did was for the greater good. But death has a way of stripping away illusions. When I died, I saw the truth. And the truth was a nightmare. They say when you die, your life flashes before your eyes. That's a lie. What really happens is that you see your life not from your own perspective, but from the outside. Like an observer watching a play they've seen 1,000 times, only now they finally understand the meaning of the script. I saw every mission, every classified operation, every moment I thought I was preventing chaos. But I wasn't preventing chaos. I was ensuring control. Their control. I saw the names of the people I silenced, the journalists whose deaths were labeled as suicides, the whistleblowers who disappeared, the scientists whose breakthroughs were buried before they could change the world. I saw how history was rewritten in real time, how entire nations were puppeteered into war, how fear was manufactured to keep the masses obedient, and worst of all, I saw my own insignificance. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't even a villain. I was a cog in a machine, so vast, so ancient, that my entire existence was nothing more than a disposable tool. And then the voices came. Not the voices of the living, not the cries of my family or the shouts of the doctors trying to bring me back. No, these voices were something else. They came from the darkness itself, a chorus of whispers woven into the very fabric of the void. He sees now, he knows, but it's too late. And then another voice, different from the others, deeper, colder, amused. Or is it? That's when I felt it. The pull. Something dragging me, not toward light, not toward peace, but toward revelation. And that was far worse. Because the truth is not a comfort. The truth is a horror beyond comprehension. It started with a feeling. Not pain, not fear. Just a strange, creeping sensation, like something heavy pressing down on my chest. I was sitting in my apartment, nursing a glass of whiskey, the room dimly lit by the cold glow of the television. The news was on, but I wasn't listening. It was all noise, static, the same carefully curated script designed to keep people distracted, afraid, compliant. I had long since stopped believing in any of it. Years in intelligence work had that effect on you. You learn that the news isn't there to inform you, it's there to program you. And yet, despite everything I knew, despite everything I had seen, I still sat there like any other civilian, letting it wash over me. Maybe that was my way of pretending I was still normal. Maybe that was my way of pretending I still had time. Then the phone rang. I stared at it, a private line that almost no one had access to. For a second, I thought about letting it go to voicemail, but something in my gut told me this wasn't the kind of call you ignore. I picked up, and for a moment, there was nothing. No voice, no static. Just silence. And then, a single word, spoken in a voice that sent ice down my spine. The line went dead. I set the phone down slowly, my pulse hammering in my ears. I had heard that word before. It was a command, an order given in operations where loose ends needed to be tied up. But this time, no name followed, no location, just a single word dropped into my ear like a guillotine blade. My body knew before my mind did. The weight in my chest deepened, turning into something sharper, more insistent. My breath hitched. My vision swam. My glass slipped from my fingers and shattered on the floor. I reached for my phone, but my hands weren't working the way they should. My fingers curled in on themselves like dead things, my muscles locking up. I fell forward, slamming onto my knees. A heart attack, that's what it was. But that wasn't possible. I was in shape, no history of heart disease, no warning signs, and yet I could feel my body shutting down piece by piece like someone flipping switches in a darkened building. My ears rang, my throat tightened, the room tilted sideways, and suddenly I was staring at the floor, my cheek pressed against the cold hardwood. I thought about calling for help, about dragging myself to the door, but deep down I already knew no one was coming, no paramedics, no last-minute rescues. This wasn't an accident, this wasn't natural, this was an execution. Darkness crept in at the edges of my vision, swallowing the room in slow, pulsing waves. My mind fought against it, grasping for something, anything, but there was nothing left to hold on to. Just silence, just stillness. My heartbeat slowed, then stopped, and for the briefest moment there was nothing. No pain, no fear, no thought. Then the world shattered. There was no tunnel, no light, no sense of drifting towards some celestial afterlife, just blackness, infinite and absolute. I wasn't floating, I wasn't falling, I simply was. A weightless fragment of consciousness suspended in a void so complete it felt like the absence of existence itself. At first, I thought I was unconscious, that this was some in-between state before my brain fully shut down. But then I realized something terrifying. I was aware. I could think, I could remember, and I could feel something else in the darkness. It started as a whisper, not in my ears, because I had no body, no senses, just the pure awareness of something stirring in the abyss. It wasn't a voice, not exactly, but it carried weight, pressing into the fabric of whatever I had become. You see now. The words weren't spoken, yet they resonated inside me, rippling through the void. Then, images. No, not images. Memories. But they weren't playing out the way I remembered them. They weren't just scenes from my life. They were unfiltered, raw, exposed for what they really were. I saw myself in the desert, rifle in hand, watching through the scope as my team secured a compound. We had been told it was a terrorist cell, that we were neutralizing a threat before it could reach our shores. But now I saw the other side, the hidden conversations, the classified reports, the orders given from people who had never set foot on a battlefield. The threat was nothing more than civilians, journalists, scientists, men and women who had discovered something they weren't supposed to know. They weren't enemies of the state, they were threats to the narrative. I had pulled the trigger that night, thinking I was protecting my country. But now I saw it for what it was, a carefully orchestrated lie. More memories surfaced, unraveling like a corrupted film reel. The missions I carried out, the operations I had never questioned. I had silenced voices that were never meant to be heard, destroyed evidence that could have changed the world, manipulated governments into wars they didn't need to fight, all in the name of control. I was never protecting freedom. I was protecting them. The unseen hands. The ones who shaped reality while the rest of the world remained blind. I wanted to look away, to shut it out, but I had no eyes to close, no body to turn from the truth. The void was forcing me to witness it all, stripping me of every illusion I had clung to in life. I had been nothing more than a tool, a disposable pawn in a game so vast, so meticulously designed, that even my death had been a calculated move. The whisper returned, colder this time, echoing through the nothingness. You understand now. And for the first time since I had died, I felt something real. Not fear, not anger, something deeper. A realization so crushing it threatened to consume me entirely. I had never been the hero. I had been the weapon. The darkness was endless, A void beyond time, beyond space. I had no body, no breath, no heartbeat, just pure awareness, suspended in nothingness. There was no sound, no movement, no sensation, just the weight of the truth I had seen. I didn't know how long I remained there. Seconds, years. In that place, time had no meaning. I would have thought I was alone, but I wasn't. Something was there, something vast, watching, waiting. Then, a shift. A presence emerged, not from the darkness, but through it, as if it had always been there, simply waiting for me to notice. It wasn't just light. It wasn't just a voice. It was knowledge itself, a force that existed beyond human comprehension. And then it spoke. Not in words, not in sound, but in something deeper, something that pressed into the core of whatever remained of me. "You see now," it said. Not a question, a statement. And the moment I understood it, the memories returned. Not mine alone, but something larger. My life unraveled before me, not as I had lived it, but as it truly was. My missions, my orders, my belief that I had been serving my country, all revealed as carefully curated deceptions. I saw every war, every staged coup, every hidden hand pulling the strings of governments, economies, nations. Every time I had silenced a voice, every time I had eliminated a threat, I had been playing my part in something far beyond what I ever imagined. I had never been on the right side. There had never been a right side. Only control, a system designed to keep the world asleep, to manufacture crises, to create enemies where there were none. I had helped build that system. I had enforced its will without even knowing who they were. And the moment I had started to question, the moment I had begun to see the cracks, they had removed me. "You were given a choice," the voice continued, and I felt it reaching into the depths of me, unraveling every excuse I wanted to cling to. "And you chose to obey." I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream that I hadn't known, that I had only followed orders, that I had believed in something greater than myself. But I couldn't. Because the truth was laid bare before me, undeniable and merciless. I had known. Maybe not in full, maybe not the details, but deep down, I had felt the wrongness of what I had done. I had silenced my own doubts, buried them beneath duty and protocol. I had told myself that morality was subjective, that good and evil were just perspectives. And now, faced with the unfiltered reality, I saw what a coward I had been. The presence did not judge me, it didn't have to. The truth was judgment enough. I had spent my life believing I was the one in control, the one who held power over others. But I had never been in control. I had always been controlled. "You cannot change the past," the voice said, neither condemning nor forgiving. "But you are not finished yet." I didn't understand. My life was over, my body was gone. There was no going back. And yet I felt it. A pull, a crack in the void, a door where there had been nothing. "You have seen the truth," the voice said one last time. "Now, what will you do with it?" And before I could answer, the light consumed me. The light didn't burn. It didn't blind me. It wasn't even light in the way we understand it. It was something else, something alive, something that stripped away everything I thought I was and left only truth. And the truth was unbearable. I saw my life again, but this time there was no comforting illusion of righteousness, no carefully constructed narrative to justify my actions. There was only reality, raw and unfiltered. Every mission I had carried out, every target I had eliminated, every lie I had told myself to sleep at night, all of it was laid bare. I had thought I was serving a greater good. I had convinced myself that the world was messy, that hard decisions had to be made by men willing to get their hands dirty. I had believed that every order I followed was for the protection of my country. But I had been blind. The truth revealed itself in layers, unfolding like a decayed film reel, playing out events I had been part of but had never truly seen. I watched as leaders I once respected shook hands behind closed doors, orchestrating conflicts, engineering economic collapses, manipulating entire populations like pieces on a chessboard. I saw names I recognized. Men and women I had worked for, trusted. smiling as they signed documents that would decide the fates of millions. Not in the name of security, not for justice, but for control. Every war had been planned long before the first bullet was fired. Every enemy had been chosen, cultivated, created, and I had been one of their tools. I saw the faces of people I had eliminated. I remembered their names, their files, the cold efficiency with which I had carried out my orders. But now, I saw them as they truly were. They weren't terrorists, they weren't threats. They were scientists on the verge of discoveries that could have reshaped the world. They were journalists who had uncovered truths too dangerous to be known. They were whistleblowers who had seen the system for what it really was and had tried to warn the world. And I had silenced them all, because I was told to, because I never questioned. The illusion of patriotism, of duty, of serving something greater than myself, it all crumbled, revealing the ugly reality underneath. I wasn't a hero, I wasn't even a soldier. I was a pawn, a disposable asset used to keep the machine running smoothly. I had followed orders, carried out missions, completed objectives, all without ever asking who was really giving the orders. And the moment I had started to ask, the moment I had begun to see through the cracks, they had removed me. Not with a bullet, not with an arrest, but with something far cleaner. A heart attack. A simple, quiet, untraceable end. And then, as if the weight of that truth wasn't enough, I saw something else. I saw them. The ones truly in power. Not presidents, not generals, not the names the world knew. Those were just faces, puppets placed in front of the cameras to keep the illusion intact. The real architects of the system never showed themselves. They didn't need to. They existed above nations, above ideologies, above the very concept of borders. They weren't bound by laws, by elections, by the shifting tides of public opinion. They were the tides. They decided who ruled and who fell. They decided what was known and what was forgotten. They were the reason history repeated itself. Because history wasn't written by the victors. It was rewritten by them. And the worst part? They didn't fear exposure. Because they knew no one would believe it. The system was so perfectly designed that even if someone uncovered the truth, even if they screamed it from the rooftops, no one would listen. They would be ridiculed, dismissed as lunatics, labeled as conspiracy theorists, buried under misinformation until their voices were drowned out. And I knew this because I had helped build that very system. I had been the one silencing voices, planting false narratives, ensuring that the truth was always hidden beneath layers of deception. I wanted to scream, to run, to fight back, but there was nowhere to go. The weight of everything I had done pressed down on me, suffocating, inescapable. I had spent my entire life believing I was part of something greater, that my actions had meaning, but now, stripped of illusion, I saw myself for what I truly was. A man who had built his life on lies. A man who had served a system that had never needed him, only used him. A man who, in the end, had never mattered at all. The weight of truth crushed me, but the presence before me was not finished. The light surrounding me shifted, expanding, and suddenly I was no longer in the void. I was somewhere else. A city stretched before me, vast and sprawling, but something was wrong. It looked like Earth, but it wasn't. The sky was gray, lifeless, an artificial haze blanketing the skyline. Skyscrapers loomed, sleek and monolithic, their glass surfaces reflecting nothing. The streets below were filled with people, moving in unison, silent, their faces void of emotion. There was no laughter, no conversation, no life, only routine. It was order, absolute and terrifying. Then I saw it. The mark, small, barely noticeable, embedded in their skin just beneath the surface. It wasn't ink, wasn't metal. It was something else, something alive, pulsing faintly like a second heartbeat. Those who had it moved freely, scanning their wrists at invisible checkpoints, entering buildings, receiving rations, existing without question. But those without it, they were different. I saw them in the shadows, gaunt, starving, hunted. They were outcasts, stripped of identity, unable to work, to buy, to function. They weren't criminals, they had simply refused. and for that, they were nothing. The voice came again, not with words, but with understanding, woven into my very being. This is what comes next. I watched as screens flickered to life on every building, faces appearing, leaders, experts, officials, all speaking in calm, measured tones. They were not threatening, they were reassuring. They spoke of safety, of progress, of unity. They promised an end to chaos, to suffering, to inequality. And the people listened, nodding, accepting, not because they were forced to, but because they wanted to. The system was perfect. It didn't rule by fear, it ruled by comfort. Those who obeyed were rewarded. Those who questioned were erased. I turned, and the vision changed. The world burned, cities crumbled, not from war, not from bombs, but from collapse. The system that had promised security had consumed itself. The illusion of order had shattered, and now only ruin remained. The people who had once walked those streets, obedient and unquestioning, were gone. Their faces, once void of emotion, were now twisted in horror, in confusion, in betrayal. They had given everything for safety, and in the end, they had nothing. I wanted to deny it, to tell myself this was just another nightmare, but the presence beside me left no room for doubt. This was not a possibility, this was inevitability. The world I had once served, the system I had once protected, it was already in motion. I had spent my life ensuring that this future came to pass, and now I was being shown the result. The final understanding settled into me like ice. There would be no war, no great uprising, no moment of reckoning where people finally opened their eyes and fought back. They wouldn't fight, because they wouldn't even realize they had lost. The greatest deception was not control through force. It was control through willingness. The world would not be enslaved. It would offer itself to its own chains. The light pulsed once more, and the voice whispered, "It is almost complete." And I knew without question that it was right. The vision faded, but the weight of it remained, pressing into me like a stone lodged deep in my chest. I had seen what was coming. Not war, not conquest, but something worse. Submission disguised as progress, control masquerading as safety. A world where freedom was an illusion so perfect that no one would even remember what it meant. And I had been part of building it. I had played my role without question, believing in enemies that never existed, silencing voices that had tried to warn of what was to come. And now, as I stood in the presence of something far greater than myself, I felt the crushing finality of it all. My life was over. My choices had been made. There was no undoing what I had done. But then the presence shifted, and I felt the question before it was even spoken. "Do you want another chance?" The words weren't a command. They weren't even an offer. They were something heavier, something deeper. A test. A door left slightly ajar, but one that would not remain open for long. I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said, or thought, or simply knew. "I have to go back. I have to stop this." Silence stretched between us, but not an absence of sound, an absence of certainty. The presence did not move, did not speak, but I could feel its understanding. It was not questioning my decision. It was waiting for me to understand the price. You cannot stop what has already begun. The words struck something raw inside me, but I didn't deny them. I had seen too much to argue. The machine was already in motion. The world had already chosen its path, even if it didn't realize it yet. But that didn't change my answer. "Then let me try." People be hunted. I had always been hunted. It was a part of the job. "Then I'll run." "You will be silenced." They had already silenced me once. I had no doubt they would try again. "Then I'll speak louder." "You will lose everything." That gave me pause, not because I feared loss, but because I had never truly understood what I had to lose. I had spent my life in the shadows, no real family, no lasting connections. The only thing I had ever been loyal to was a system that had discarded me the moment I became inconvenient. But now, standing at the precipice of something I could not comprehend. I understood what was really being taken from me. If I returned, I would never be safe again. I would never find peace. The people I tried to warn would turn against me. The ones I tried to save would call me insane. I would not be a hero. I would be a fugitive, alone, desperate, forgotten. And still, I knew my answer. Let me go back. For the first time, the presence seemed to move. Not in space, not in form, but in something deeper, something woven into the fabric of the void itself. The weight of it pressed against me, and I felt the finality of my decision settle into place. There would be no undoing this choice, no second request, no reversal. If I went back, I would not be guided. I would not be protected. I would not be given proof to convince the world. I would only have what I had seen, what I knew, and it would be up to me to decide what to do with it. The silence deepened, then cracked, splitting open like a fault line beneath my feet. Then go! The light shattered, and I fell, falling. That was the first sensation. Not the weightless drift of before, not the stillness of the void. This was different. It had force, speed, direction. I was being pulled, ripped from something vast and infinite, forced back into the confines of flesh and bone. My body wasn't ready. It convulsed, as if rejecting me, my lungs burning, my chest seizing, every nerve firing at once. Then, air, cold, sharp, tearing through me as I gasped, as my heart slammed back to life, as the weight of the physical world crashed down on me like an avalanche. I heard voices, muffled at first, distant, a beeping sound, the hum of fluorescent lights, something pressing against my face, forcing oxygen into my lungs. My body ached in ways I couldn't describe, like every cell had been shattered and stitched back together. I tried to move, but restraints held me down. A bright light seared through my eyelids as someone pried one open, a voice calling out in shock. "He's back." Chaos erupted around me, footsteps, hurried orders, machines beeping wildly. My mind clawed its way through the haze, struggling to connect to the reality I had just been thrown into. Hospital, machines, people. I wasn't dead. I was here. I turned my head slightly, vision swimming, and saw a doctor staring at me as if I had just risen from the grave. Maybe I had. My chest ached as I inhaled, my ribs protesting with each breath. I tried to speak, but my throat was raw, my voice nothing more than a rasp. The doctor leaned closer, his face etched with disbelief. "You flatlined," he said. 3 minutes. You were gone. 3 minutes. 3 minutes in their world, a lifetime in mine. I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself, but the moment I did, flashes of what I had seen surged forward. The city, the people, marked and unmarked, the silent submission, the collapse. The truth. It was still there, imprinted on me like a scar, too real to ignore. I had returned, but I wasn't the same man who had died. The doctors spoke in hushed voices, whispering words like miracle and impossible, running tests, checking vitals, but I barely heard them. None of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was, what now? I had seen the future. I had seen the machine operating in plain sight, controlling everything while the world remained blind. I had seen how it would all end, and I had been given this second chance for a reason. But how do you warn a world that refuses to listen? How do you fight something that no one believes exists? I wasn't sure. But I knew one thing: I couldn't stay here. The doctors called it a miracle. The nurses avoided my eyes, as if sensing something unnatural about me. The hospital staff whispered behind closed doors, their voices hushed but laced with unease. No one comes back after 3 minutes. No one just wakes up after being clinically dead. But I had. And I knew that whatever had sent me back, whatever had allowed me to return, had done so with a purpose. They ran tests, CT scans, MRIs, blood work. They checked my heart, my brain, my reflexes. Everything was normal. Too normal. My body showed no signs of what should have been fatal trauma. I heard them speculate in medical jargon, searching for an explanation. None of them could fathom the truth, that I had died, left this world, and returned with knowledge I was never meant to have. I kept my mouth shut, letting them do their work, knowing that the real fight wasn't inside this hospital. It was waiting for me outside. When they finally released me, I stepped out into a world that no longer felt real. The streets, the cars, the people going about their lives, it all looked the same, but I had changed. I could see it now, the patterns, the invisible structure shaping reality, the advertisements, the news headlines, the way information flowed. It wasn't random, it was deliberate, controlled. The very things I used to enforce, I could now see for what they truly were. Manipulation disguised as choice, compliance disguised as freedom, and I had spent my life making sure no one ever questioned it. I tried to tell someone, a friend from my old life, one of the few people I still trusted. I told him I had seen something on the other side, that the world was not what we thought it was, that everything we believed, our leaders, our wars, our crises, had been orchestrated, that we were being led towards something inevitable, something irreversible. He listened, nodding slowly, his expression unreadable, and then he laughed. "You sound like one of those lunatics, man," he said, shaking his head. "You really think there's some grand conspiracy controlling everything? You think you died and came back with a message? Jesus, Greg, they should have kept you in the hospital a little longer." I tried to press him, to make him see, but the more I spoke, the more he pulled away. To him, I wasn't a man with knowledge, I was a man who had lost his mind. And he wasn't the only one. I reached out to others, people I once trusted, former colleagues, old contacts. The response was the same: concern, skepticism, dismissal. Some humored me, nodding along, offering half-hearted reassurances. Others cut me off entirely. A few warned me to stop talking. "Greg, you're treading dangerous ground," one of them said, lowering his voice. "Even if you were right, even if any of this were true, you think they'd let you talk about it?" That was when I understood. It wasn't just that people refused to believe me. It was that even those who suspected something was wrong were too afraid to admit it. The system didn't need to silence people. It had already conditioned them to silence themselves. Then the surveillance started. Subtle at first. A car parked too long outside my apartment, a strange lag in my phone calls, emails that wouldn't send. An old colleague of mine, still in intelligence, sent me a single message before cutting contact. "They know you're talking. Stop now." And that's when I realized I was alone. No one was coming to help me. No one was going to listen. If I wanted the world to know the truth, I would have to find a way to make them hear it, even if it cost me everything. You don't have to believe me. In fact, I expect you not to. That's how the system was designed. They don't need to silence every voice, erase every piece of evidence, or hunt down every person who stumbles too close to the truth. No, their greatest weapon isn't force, it's doubt. They've built a world where the truth sounds like a lie, where people like me are written off as lunatics, as conspiracy theorists, as casualties of paranoia. That's the brilliance of it. The perfect system doesn't need to hide. It simply needs to make sure no one will believe the truth when they hear it. But I'm not here to convince you. I'm not here to make you believe in some grand conspiracy. I'm here to tell you what I saw, what I know. And once you hear it, once you let even a fraction of it settle into your mind, you'll start to see it too. The patterns, the control, the way information is shaped, the way events unfold exactly as they need to, always keeping you afraid. Always keeping you distracted, always keeping you looking at the wrong thing. None of it is accidental, none of it is random. And by the time you realize that, it's already too late. You think you're free? That your thoughts are your own? Look around. The choices you make, the news you consume, the opinions you hold, how many of them were given to you? How many of them have been carefully placed in front of you, tailored to make you believe you arrived at them yourself? They don't force obedience, they manufacture it. They make you want it. And once you want it, once you choose it, there is no need for chains. I've seen where this path leads. I've seen the future they've planned. It's not some dystopian nightmare where armies march in the streets and people are dragged from their homes. That's the lie they feed you. the Hollywood version of oppression. The real thing? It's quiet. It's seamless. It's a world where people accept their servitude because they don't even realize it exists. Where freedom is an illusion so convincing that no one even questions it anymore. And by the time they do, it's already gone. I wasn't supposed to come back. I wasn't supposed to remember, but I do. And now that I do, there's no turning back. They know I'm talking. They know I'm trying to warn you. And they will do what they always do. Erase, discredit, make sure my voice is drowned out until no one remembers I ever existed. But you've heard me, and now you have a choice. Ignore this, call me insane, and go back to your life. That's the easy option, that's what they want you to do. Or start paying attention, start questioning, start seeing, because once you do, you'll never be able to stop. Once you see the strings, you can't pretend they aren't there. And when that moment comes, when you finally realize how deep this goes, you'll have to ask yourself the same question I did. Now that you know the truth, what are you going to do with it?